All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Pump House's Virtual Artist Talks. I'm Olivia, the current Pump House Arts Administrator, and today I am joined by Kirsten Engel, photographer and encaustic artist whose exhibition Flora will be on display in our front gallery from May 24th to July 15th, 2023. So, welcome and thank you for joining me today. I always like to start out with asking people how long you've been creating artwork and any history in different mediums you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to have this opportunity to have the show at the Pump House. I currently am living in the country southwest of Madison. I've lived in Madison pretty much my whole life, but I am a self-taught artist. I actually went to school in social work and have been working in social work and nonprofit management for most of my adult life. But art has always been kind of a form of therapy and stress relief for me. I was really interested in art when I was young, and I had a high school teacher who really mentored me. Um, but then, life happened, and I had to take a job that I felt would pay the bills when I had a family and all that good stuff. But in the last probably about 10 years, I've really gotten back into it and have been doing it more professionally for probably about 7 years now. So,
Great. And has it
yeah.
always been photography focused in the art that you've done?
No, I have experimented with many, many different mediums. Photography was kind of the one that really stuck for me. Um, but I have explored many, many different ones. I tend to get really excited about new things and I try to incorporate different techniques and skills and mediums in my work. And that's kind of how I got into the encaustic because I was doing photography. I was doing your more traditional portrait and fine art photography professionally for a while, and I sort of got a little bit bored with that. I always need like to up my game a little bit, so that's when I started incorporating the encaustic work into that. So
Great. Yeah, and we can
yeah,
talk a little bit more about that specific process of encaustic when we get into your individual pieces.
yeah.
Um, but for this specific exhibition, Flora, what drove you to specifically photograph nature and flowers?
Yeah, so basically, my inspiration is my love of nature and my desire to help preserve it. So I'm very inspired by beauty and by the beauty of nature and the ever-changing life of plants and the day-to-day changes that you can see in plants. And also kind of it's about noticing the little things and having a sense of wonder about that. Um, I just am so fascinated with how quickly, especially in the spring, plants change and the different stages of their growth. I just find super, super fascinating. And my desire to kind of get other people excited about nature and help preserve it is really what inspired the Flora series.
Well, great. Yeah, let's get
Mm.
into a few of the specific pieces. So this is one of your works, Basking in the Light. If you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about your process in taking these photos, because they're definitely different from traditional nature photography that we tend to see.
Right. Yeah, so I like to say all of my pieces start with a walk in the woods. I always take my camera with me and I don't necessarily have anything in mind when I head out and I'm just looking for inspiration. And I use an Nikon, a modern DSLR camera, but I do use vintage lenses. I really love the feel of the old vintage lenses. I don't like the sharp, really everything in focus type of look. I mean, I like that for some things, but for my pieces that I create, I really like the blurriness and kind of the vintage feel of the older lenses. And then I do a technique called free lensing where I take the lens off my camera. And for most of my photos, I actually flip it around and I'm holding it backwards to the camera unattached. And when you do that, you can really get some interesting effects. You get some light leaks in sometimes. You can get different bending of the light and sometimes even stretching of the plants and stuff. And it's a very experimental process. You're never quite sure what you're going to get. The more you do it, the more you can really start getting certain pieces in focus, but you'll never get like the whole image in focus. So that, yeah, that's, I love doing it. It just creates some really interesting photos that you can't get when you have your lens attached to the camera.
Yeah, I've heard we've had a few people in to see the exhibition already and describing they almost look like paintings
Right.
with the way that we get the intentional blurring and things like that. So it's a really beautiful technique that
Mhm.
you've used. And what made you decide to also use encaustic in these pieces as well?
So I really like how it kind of makes it a little bit more three-dimensional. I love the idea of reintroducing nature into the piece. So I'm bringing in the beeswax and the pine resin that you would normally find in nature. I just really love that organic feel and how that kind of changes the images a little bit and gives them a little bit more translucency and texture.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. So let's move into your next piece, the Queen. Is there
Queen.
anything specifically about your process or this piece that you would like to discuss?
Yeah, so the queen really is my love of like, I mean, I feel like the queen, I love Queen's Anne lace. It's such a delicate, intricate plant that people often just dismiss as a weed and don't give it a second look. But if you really pay attention to the different life stages of the plant, it's really quite amazing plant. So the Queen Anne's lace is a favorite of mine throughout the summer. I love you, it'll even have different colors to it often that you wouldn't notice if you didn't look closely, but the patterns that you can get out of it is pretty amazing. And I just think it's an awesome underrated weed that
Hmm.
really is quite amazing. And the fact that we can get these textures and patterns just so naturally in nature is just, it's just a wonder to me, and it inspires me.
Yeah, and these pieces are quite big, and so I think it's very special to
Yes.
see such close-up, small details in such a large piece. It feels like you really get to be close up and like intimate with a part of plants and nature that we don't normally do. So it's
Yeah,
really great.
I love photographing kind of the micro, small little scenes and then really blowing them up big.
Hmm.
Because when
Hmm.
I'm kind of like photographing them, that's kind of how I'm envisioning, like, because you get so focused in the world and um, it's, yeah,
Great,
I just love it.
perfect. All right, here's another one of your pieces, Moonlit. Is there anything you'd like to say about this piece?
Yeah, so this one was one of the first ones that I did that I was able to get that lighting in the background just right. Because when you're photographing so small, it's very, I mean, because this plant was maybe 2 inches, the section that I was photographing. And then trying to get the light just right in the background to kind of create that almost moonlit type of effect. And it's just light coming through a bush, basically. This is a big bush, and this is just one tiny section of that bush with just a little light poking through. But I really liked how the edges turned out dark, and it felt like almost a night scene with the moon lighting it. But yeah, I love that process of looking at a big bush and then trying to find just a little section that could possibly tell a little story or give us a little inspiration or sense of wonder for the bush.
Yeah, for sure. And then here is, I think this is your last piece that we're discussing today, but Field of Dreams. This piece is quite large and it's definitely become a favorite already in the gallery. Um, is there anything you'd
Yeah,
like to
so
say about this?
this is one of my favorites as well, and it was one of my favorite experiences, but I think I just came across, and I've never seen anything like it in my life, this huge field of lupines, which you don't see very often, and they don't last really long, but when you do see them, they just create this, I mean, they just make you feel happy. Like, I don't know how you couldn't be like happy and full of joy when you're in a field of lupines. So I ended up and they're fairly short, so I oftentimes end up like laying on the ground to get my photos, and that's what happened in this photo too.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing about your pieces is that they are mounted on wood panels.
Mhm.
Would you mind, does that just work best for using encaustic, or is there a specific reason you decided to mount these photos on wood?
Yeah, so it definitely, when you add the encaustic on top, it has to be a pretty solid surface because encaustic is it's very archival. It's actually an ancient technique. But if you do bend the piece, it could potentially crack. So definitely you want something solid to put it on so that you don't risk um, that that cracking. But yeah, I make all my own panels too, so it's really a kind of a long process for me because I'm out in the woods taking the pictures, and then I'm printing them and mounting them, and then I'm building these panels, that go up to like 3 by 4 feet depending on the image, and then adding the encaustic to it. But yeah, the paneling is very important because you could potentially have some cracking with the encaustic when it dries if it's not flat.
All right. Thank you for sharing your process with us. It's very
Yeah, yeah.
interesting and fun to listen to. So, if you'd like to see Kristen's work in person, you can definitely come to our galleries anytime from now until July 15th. But you're also welcome to our artist reception, where you can meet Kirsten as well as our other artist in our Cotter Gallery. And that is June 2nd from 5 to 7 p.m. And you are more than welcome to come, anyone who's watching. And lastly, is there anything you would like people to keep in mind when viewing your work in person?
I mean, I think the main thing is just to think about like how you feel. And I really hope people get that sense of wonder and joy that I get in nature and kind of take that feeling with them in their everyday lives, and hopefully use that to kind of appreciate nature more. And ultimately, the hope is to inspire people to help conserve our natural environment. So, yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.